You almost didn't notice them. They were always there, in the meeting, at the table, in the room where everything important was being decided. But they weren't the ones deciding, or so you thought. They weren't the ones arguing, explaining, positioning. They sat slightly back. They watched. They asked a question occasionally, one question, carefully chosen, and then returned to silence. You didn't pay them much attention. Nobody did. And then one day, something happened. A decision was made that you didn't see coming. A move was executed that nobody had anticipated. A moment arrived where someone who had been invisible was suddenly, completely, undeniably present. And you realized, with a specific quality of cold discomfort, that this person had known things you hadn't known they knew, had seen things you hadn't known they were watching, had been building something quietly, in the space that everyone else had decided wasn't worth monitoring. You had been in the same rooms, you had been having the same conversations, and they had learned infinitely more than you had. The question that followed you afterward wasn't about them. It was about what you had been doing while they were paying attention. And here is the harder question underneath that one. Not what were you doing, but what were you revealing? Because in every room where you were performing, explaining, positioning, in every conversation where you were working to be understood, someone quiet was receiving everything you were sending, everything you intended to communicate, and everything you didn't. Most people believe that power belongs to whoever speaks best, whoever makes the strongest argument, whoever commands the room, whoever fills the silence with enough confidence and enough volume to make the space feel like it belongs to them. This is one of the most expensive misunderstandings available, because the most valuable information in any room is never delivered by the person who is speaking. It is revealed, slowly, continuously, involuntarily, by the person who is speaking to someone who knows how to listen. Think about what actually happens in a conversation between someone who needs to be heard and someone who is content to listen. The speaker fills the silence. They explain, they justify, they elaborate in the direction of what they need the listener to understand about them. And in that elaboration, in the gap between what they intend to communicate and what actually comes through, they reveal their fears, their ambitions, their insecurities, their calculations, the distance between what they say they want and what their behavior suggests they actually want. Not because they are careless, because almost nobody can sustain the discipline of revealing nothing for the duration of a real conversation with someone who is genuinely paying attention. The quiet person is not passive in this exchange. They are working harder than anyone in the room. They are tracking the gap between the words and the meaning behind the words. They are noticing what topics produce defensiveness and what topics produce openness. They are building, in real time, an increasingly precise map of the person they are listening to, and they are giving nothing away in return. This asymmetry, one person's map growing richer while the other reveals the territory, is the specific mechanism through which quiet people accumulate a form of power that loud people never do. Consider what this means over months and years of a professional relationship. The colleague who speaks little in meetings but listens to everything develops an understanding of the room that nobody else possesses. They know who is actually aligned with whom and who is performing alignment. They know which arguments produce anxiety and which people and why. They know whose confidence is genuine and whose is a performance maintained through the specific energy of needing to be believed. This knowledge is never announced. It simply informs every decision this person makes, every alliance they build, every moment they choose to speak, and every moment they choose to remain quiet. Here is something that almost nobody talks about. When you stay silent in a room where other people are filling the silence, something happens in the minds of the people around you that has nothing to do with what you are actually thinking. They project. Human beings are profoundly uncomfortable with the unreadable. When someone doesn't speak, doesn't react, doesn't give the expected signals of agreement or disagreement, the people around them don't experience neutral. They experience a void. And voids, in human social psychology, get filled automatically. Some people project confidence. The quiet person must be confident. Why else would they need so little from the room? Some people project intelligence. The quiet person must be thinking something important. Why else are they not speaking? Some people project threat. The quiet person must be watching for something. Why else are they so still? And some people project guilt. The quiet person must know something, and why else would they seem so unmoved by what is being said? None of these projections are necessarily accurate, but they are happening. And the person who understands this, who understands that their silence is not being received as absence, but as presence, as weight, as something that other people are trying to interpret and cannot, holds an extraordinary advantage. They are communicating without speaking. They are influencing without revealing. They are perceived as powerful not because of what they have done, but because of what they haven't said, and what people imagine might be behind the not saying. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wrote about the prince who reveals nothing as a prince who gives his opponents nothing to work with. The prince who speaks freely hands his enemies his strategy. The prince who withholds forces his opponents to operate on assumptions that may or may not reflect reality. And assumptions, he understood, are a form of vulnerability. The inaccessible person is not merely protected, they are actively advantaged. Every moment of their silence is a moment in which others are working with incomplete information, while they work with complete information. That asymmetry compounds over time. Here is what that looks like in a concrete situation. You're in a room where a decision is being made. The loudest people are presenting their positions, defending their views, revealing through their arguments exactly what they are afraid of losing and what they most want to gain. They are performing, and in performing they are informing. Not the room, the quiet person in the room who is watching, who notices that one person becomes defensive when a particular approach is mentioned, who observes that another person's confidence is intact when they have an audience but wavers when they speak one-on-one, who registers without comment the distance between what is being said and what is being felt. By the end of the meeting, the quiet person knows things that none of the performers know they revealed. They leave with more than they arrived with. Everyone else leaves approximately the same. Think about what people reveal when they believe they are simply having a conversation. The insecurities come out first. Not always directly, rarely directly, but in the topics they return to, the comparisons they make, the moments where the confidence in their voice drops slightly below what the words are claiming. The person who mentions their salary 3 times in 20 minutes is telling you something that has nothing to do with their salary. The ambitions come out next, in what they say they don't care about, in the speed at which they engage when certain subjects come up, in the specific quality of attention they bring to people who have what they want. You learn more about what someone is actually pursuing by watching what they unconsciously orient toward than by listening to what they consciously describe. The contradictions emerge slowly, over multiple conversations. The person who describes themselves one way but behaves another. The values that are claimed loudly and abandoned quietly when they become inconvenient. The version of themselves they are performing, and the version that appears in unguarded moments when they forget they are being observed. And the patterns, the most valuable intelligence of all. The way someone responds to being challenged, the way they treat people who can do nothing for them, the way they behave when they are anxious versus when they are comfortable, the way they change when the power dynamic in a room shifts. None of this is available to the person who is busy being interesting. All of it is available to the person who has decided that being interested is more powerful. The quiet person in the room is not distracted or disengaged. They are running a continuous, low-visibility intelligence operation. They are learning things that the people being learned about would never voluntarily disclose. They are building a model of the people around them that those people do not know exists and cannot therefore protect themselves against. This is not manipulation. It is perception. And perception applied with patience is one of the most decisive advantages available in any human environment. There is a specific kind of information that only becomes available after you have been quiet long enough. Not the information that people share in the first conversation. Not the surface presentation, the competence, the warmth, the version of themselves they have prepared for new audiences. That information is designed to be received. It is curated. It tells you what they want you to know, which tells you something but not everything. The information that matters arrives later, in the second conversation, when the performance is slightly less prepared. In the third, when they have begun to assume familiarity, and familiarity loosens what formality holds in place. In the moment of pressure, when the constructed version doesn't have the resources to maintain itself and the real version briefly appears. In the unguarded comment about someone who isn't in the room. In the reaction to news that affects their position. In the way they speak about the people they used to be close to and no longer are. The quiet person collects all of this. Not with judgment, not with the specific coldness of someone cataloging weakness for eventual use. With the patient, clear-eyed attention of someone who understands that knowing who people actually are is more valuable than maintaining the pleasant fiction of who they are presenting themselves to be. And here is the practical consequence of this collection. When the moment arrives, when a decision needs to be made, when an alliance needs to be chosen, when trust needs to be extended or withheld, the quiet person is not operating on the first conversation. They are operating on the full record, the pattern across time, the version of the person that appeared when the performance was expensive to maintain. That is a different kind of knowledge than almost anyone else in the room possesses, and it translates, directly and without drama, into better decisions, into alliances that hold under pressure because they were built on accurate understanding, into choices about who to trust that are calibrated to reality, rather than to presentation. The quiet person does not make fewer mistakes than everyone else, but they make a specific kind of mistake less frequently, the mistake of trusting the performance, of extending confidence to someone based on who they appeared to be in conditions designed to produce a favorable impression. This particular mistake, avoided consistently over time, changes outcomes in ways that are difficult to quantify, but impossible to miss. There is another dimension to this that most people never consider. Being underestimated is one of the most valuable positions available. Think about how surveillance actually works in a social or professional environment. People watch those they consider threatening. They monitor those they consider ambitious. They track those they believe are competing with them. They are vigilant about the people they have identified as players in the game. They ignore the people they have decided don't matter. And the person who has been decided doesn't matter, has something extraordinary, freedom of movement. They can build, observe, position, and prepare without anyone tracking what they are doing. They can grow without triggering the defensive responses that growth usually activates in the people around them. They can become something very different from what anyone expected without anyone having seen the transformation coming. The person who is underestimated by their adversaries has already won something significant. Not the final game, but the opening, the space in which the final game will be decided. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who is not feared is often not monitored, and that the prince who is not monitored can maneuver freely in ways that the feared prince cannot. He was not recommending that people pretend to be weak. He was observing that the appearance of insignificance is a resource, that being dismissed early creates opportunity, that the person who has to fight for every inch of ground because everyone is watching them has a harder road than the person who moves in the blind spot. Most people spend their energy making sure they are taken seriously, making sure the room knows they are present, making sure their intelligence and their capability and their ambition are visible to everyone who matters. The quiet person has understood something different. Being invisible is not a failure. It is a position, and from that position, a great deal becomes possible. Think about the people who have changed things quietly, who built their understanding, their resources, their positions without announcing each step, who appeared to arrive suddenly at capability or influence that seemed to come from nowhere. It didn't come from nowhere. It came from a long period of deliberate, unmonitored accumulation. The absence of fanfare was not modesty. It was strategy. Every moment they weren't being watched was a moment they could move without resistance. This quality, the capacity for productive silence, for observation over performance, for strategic invisibility, is not a personality trait that some people are born with and others are not. It is a practice, and like any practice, it begins with a decision. The decision to become comfortable with silence rather than anxious about it. Most people experience silence as a social failure, as something that needs to be fixed, as a signal that the conversation is not working, that they are not performing adequately, that they need to add something to repair what feels like damage. This anxiety about silence is the engine that makes people talk when they should be listening. The first practice is simple and difficult. When you feel the urge to fill a silence, don't. Let it sit. Let it stretch past the point of comfort and observe what happens, what the other person does with the silence, how they fill it, what comes out of them in the absence of your performance. The second practice is to listen for what is not being said. Every conversation contains two conversations, the one being spoken and the one being withheld. The second conversation is often more informative than the first. It appears in hesitations, in the topics that are conspicuously avoided, in the moments where the energy in someone's voice changes key without explanation. Learning to hear the second conversation requires the specific kind of attention that is only available when you are not also trying to perform. The third practice is to observe patterns rather than moments. A single moment tells you very little. A pattern tells you almost everything. The person who is kind to you once and unkind to you twice has told you something. The person who agrees with you in public and contradicts you in private has told you something. The person who is generous when they need you and unavailable when they don't has told you something. These patterns are visible only to someone who has been watching long enough, quietly enough, without the distortion that comes from needing the person to be other than they are. None of these practices require you to become someone different. They require you to become more present to what is already happening around you. The information is always there. Most people are too busy talking to receive it. There is a fourth practice that is less discussed and perhaps most important. Become comfortable with not being understood immediately. The person who needs the room to understand them right now will speak before they should, will clarify before clarity was needed, will confirm their position before it was challenged. The anxiety of being misunderstood, of having your intelligence or your intentions or your position unclear to the people around you, is one of the primary drivers of premature speech. The quiet person has made peace with delayed understanding. They know that time will reveal what words would have rushed, that what they build will eventually speak more clearly than anything they could have said, that being misunderstood temporarily is a small price for the freedom of not having to perform. Only loud people tell the world who they are. Quiet people discover who everyone else is, and that difference, that asymmetry in what each type of person knows about the room at the end of any given conversation, changes everything about what each person is capable of doing next. The person who has been performing has been seen. Their insecurities, their ambitions, their calculations, these are now part of the record. They have handed the room a map they can no longer take back. They may have won the audience, but they have also lost the invisibility that would have allowed them to move more freely. The person who has been observing has seen. They hold a map that no one else knows they have. They understand the room in ways the room does not understand them. They can make decisions based on information that the loudest person in the conversation doesn't know they have. The most dangerous person in the room is rarely the one who spoke the most. It is the one who said the least and understood the most, who watched while others revealed, who listened while others performed, who allowed themselves to be underestimated, knowing that underestimation is the gift that the room gives you when it has decided you are not worth watching. Silence is not the absence of power. It is the environment where perception becomes power, and where the people who have learned to inhabit it completely become, quietly and irrevocably, the most dangerous people in the room.